There is an old idea in literary criticism circles that there are really only two basic stories, that every story that's ever been told, every book, every movie, every play, every single story falls into one of two categories. Either it's a quest narrative, in other words, someone goes on a quest, on a journey to sometimes find something, sometimes to lose something. The caveat to the quest narrative is that it can be an internal quest. So that's narrative number one, is the quest. Or, alternatively, the only other story is a stranger comes to town. Those are the two. It's either a quest or a stranger comes to town. Sometimes those two can combine, but one or the other, if not both. Okay, let's try it out for a minute. Give me a story. Lord of the Rings is quest, for sure. David Copperfield is quest. Lear is quest, I would say, and also a stranger comes to town in Lear. What's the stranger in Lear? Old age, I think, okay? To Kill a Mockingbird is quest. Moby Dick is quest, for sure. Godfather is quest and stranger comes to town. Steve? Harry Met Sally? That is definitely stranger comes to town. No, I think that's quest. So Wizard of Oz? Oh, Wizard of Oz is definitely quest. So you get the point. But what about the Bible? What about the Bible? We'll make it even a little bit narrower. Let's just take the Torah. Okay, so the first 5 books of the Bible. What is that? Is that quest? Is it stranger comes to town? I think you can argue there's a stranger comes to town element in the Torah. Who's the stranger that comes to town? God. Yeah, God is a stranger. God comes to town and changes everything. But the Hebrew Bible in general, definitely the Torah, if you think about it, it's filled with quests. One quest after another quest after another quest. You have Jacob's flight from Esau. You have Moses leaving Egypt and traveling to Midian. You have Joseph searching after his brothers. I mean, it really is one quest after. Even the kind of core overarching narrative of the Torah is a quest narrative. The Israelites leave Egypt and they're trying to make their way to Eretz Yisrael, to the Promised Land. One of my favorite quotes about the idea of quest comes from Yes Ben, the Lord of the Rings, and it's said by Bilbo the Hobbit. Remember Bilbo Baggins the Hobbit? And he's speaking to his nephew, whose name is Frodo. And this is what Bilbo says. He says, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out of your front door. You step on the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." And what I love about that quote is the idea that the quests that we go on don't happen in a linear fashion, right? It's not a direct line from point A to point B to point C, where it's all over the place, all over the map. And that's the way life works. I mean, that's exactly the way life works. There are detours along the way, unexpected stops, flat tires, strange encounters, wrong turns, illnesses, losses. The list can go on and on and on. And so often, the journey that begins as a plan that is intended to be structured and work in a particular way ends up being something entirely different than it was originally conceived of. So 40 years ago, when I was 20, if you told me I would end up being a rabbi one day, I would have said you're absolutely crazy. I mean, I could not even have possibly conceived of that idea 40 years ago when I was 20. John Lennon, I think, or it's often attributed to John Lennon, who said, "Life is what happens when you are busy making other plans," right? So in terms of the Bible's quests, I think you can make the argument that of all the characters who embark on a quest in Torah, the great figure and the most important quest comes from the story of Abraham, and that's Lech Lecha, Abraham's story that we started reading this morning. He is the Torah's first true questor, the first pilgrim of the Bible, and his quest begins in Lech Lecha, in this morning's Parsha. Beginning of this morning's story, God calls to Abraham out of the blue. He responds immediately, packs up his things, doesn't seem to think twice about it, and he leaves his native land. And what's always been striking to me about that is the sense that he has no idea where he's going. You know, you would think if God came to you, Carol, and said, hey, Carol, pack up and tomorrow you're on your way, you might say, God, sounds good, but a little bit more information. You know, could I have a little bit more? Maybe a triptych for those of us who are old enough to remember the triptychs. We used to go to AAA to get our triptychs, and it would tell us where we were going. Abraham has absolutely no idea, but he doesn't say a word. He packs his bags. He turns to the west, he gathers his people and his belongings, and he gets out onto the road. Now, of course, at the time, he had no idea what adventures, what trials, what tribulations, and what triumphs he would find along the way. From this morning's Parsha, battling with the army of kings, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, which will be coming up in next week's Parsha, the binding of his son Isaac, Sarah's death, the encounters with Pharaoh. I mean, again, the list can go on and on and on. He had no idea when he left his native land. And all of these events, recorded in the 3 Torah portions that tell the story of Abraham's life, all of them, they make up the substance of his journey. And somehow, in the midst of all of these things that he was dealing with, in the course of traveling from place to place to place and facing all the dangers that he had to face and being tested over and over and over again, somehow in the middle of all that, he managed to become the very first human being in human history to enter into relationship with God as a Jew. The very first one was Abraham. Now, of course, in Abraham's quest, you can always see an echo, maybe in any quest, of your own journey through life, and you realize that the path that you take and the quest that you are on, in a way, it's somehow still connected to Abraham and the quest that he began so many years ago. You look back, how far have you come? How far have you come since way back when? You look forward, how far do you have to go? And looking ahead, always realizing that distance is great and can be daunting. But what do? You open up the door. You take the first step, you're out on the road, and you never really know where you're going to be headed. You know, maybe you never find exactly what you want in life. I have yet to meet someone who feels that every piece of life is exactly in the place that they want it to be. And even if you have a moment when it feels like maybe it's getting there, just around the corner, and something seems to happen, and it doesn't quite arrive. I think Judaism suggests to us in many ways that life is less about reaching a final destination than it is about experiencing the journey along the way, all of the events that define who we are, about being engaged in that quest, and about seeking as a way of living and not as a means to an end. You know, Moses never makes it to the promised land, never gets there, but he also never stops trying. The people never get there. The Torah is a book that ends without having an actual ending. The people are still outside of the land when the Torah ends. That's our most important book. And so the most important book, the most sacred book we have in our tradition, the Torah, ends as a story of a quest unfulfilled. And you know what, to me, that's always been a comforting thought, actually, a comforting thought. So here's an old Irish blessing for you, an old Irish blessing. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and the rain fall soft on your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of God's hand. Shabbat Shalom.